Hello, I'm Gary Crowley and welcome to a special feature on your Slade in Flame DVD. Now we're now going to talk about the making of the movie, and who better than to fill us in than the man himself, Noddy Holder.
Nice to be here.
Noddy, welcome. Let's go right back to the very beginning. Always a good place to start, I find. How did all of this come about?
Well, up until 1973, we'd really been on a crest of a wave for the first 3 years of the 70s with lots of hit records, lots of #1 records. We'd had 6 #1 records, and our manager, Chas Chandler, who was the bass player in the Animals, and he was also the man who discovered Jimi Hendrix and managed and produced Jimi Hendrix. He was our manager and producer. He always took the Beatles as the blueprint of our career. He always wanted us to emulate, or try to emulate, the sort of stages that the Beatles had gone through. So we'd had all the #1 records. We'd gone straight into #1 the first day of release with 3 records. And he saw it that the next career move for us would be a movie. We weren't actually sure about it. I mean, everybody wants to be in a movie, don't they? But I mean, we weren't actually sure that we could pull it off. None of us had ever acted before. So it was a bit of a weird challenge for us, but he was determined. He was sure we could pull it off. But the next thing to do was to find a script or a story that he thought we could cope with. And we didn't want to end up doing, well, me particularly, didn't want to end up doing a slapstick, run-around type movie, speeded up film and all that, because I thought that's what people would expect from us automatically. That's what they'd put Slade in that bag. That's what they'd be, a comedy sort of fast-moving slapstick type film, which I thought was defeating the object a bit of making a movie, because that had been done before with several groups had done it before. And Chas tended to agree, if we could pull it off, actually acting and find a real good story. And initially, we had a few people sent us scripts when the feelers were put out to get stories. And Chas's assistant was a guy called John Steele, who was actually in the Animals with him. He was the drummer in the Animals. One of the ones he came up with was a comedy, and it was a spoof on the Quatermass experiment. And it was going to be called the Quatermass experiment. I was going to be Professor Quatermass, but Dave Hill was going to be killed in the first 15 minutes by the Triffids. So that had to go out the window because Dave wasn't going to be standing for that. So that one went to the wall. And we had a few other people sent us stuff, but nothing we really thought we could get our teeth into. I mean, we'd obviously got to do something that was based around music to pull it off. You know, that's the only thing, you know, we really did want to include a lot of music in it, obviously. And eventually, Chas tracked down this script that had come through. He actually more or less commissioned it, really, that we'd make a film about the story of a rock and roll band. And so we got various people to actually write treatments for us. And the one treatment came in, which was the treatment which eventually became Flame. But when we read it, we liked the story, the basic idea of the story, but it wasn't true to life of what a band's all about. Unless you've been in a band, they tend to write about the myth of rock and roll, not the reality of rock and roll. And we wanted to show what rock and roll was really like, behind the scenes, not what the fantasy out front is, you know, that everybody sees all the glitz and glamour and the parties and all that. We wanted to show the other side of the business. And so what we did, the writer of Flame was a guy called Andrew Birkin, who was the brother of Jane Birkin, you know, who'd made that rather raunchy record in the 60s. And we thought we'd take him and Richard Loncrane, who was the director. He was the director of the film, and it was the first movie he'd ever directed. He's gone on to do lots of stuff since, but it was actually his first movie, directing. And we decided to take him on a tour of America, the two of them, to show them the reality of what life was like on the road. And whilst travelling between gigs, one-nighters, we would talk to them about our career, tell them stories about other bands' careers, and that would be assimilated into what Flame, the treatment that they'd sent us. So we took them to the States. I mean, they only lasted about 2 weeks on the road up. They couldn't take any more. I don't think they realised what a circus it all was. But they got enough material from us to go back and rewrite it and put it into the script. Every scene in the movie actually is true to life. Not Slade's necessarily, but they're stories from other bands. We didn't want it to be the story of Slade. We didn't want to confuse the fans or the public with making it a rockumentary of them thinking that it was Slade's story. It was loosely based on Slade's story, but with lots of other band stories thrown in. Good example is when I got nailed into the coffin early on in the film. That story came about by one of our road crew used to work for Screaming Lord Sutch. And one night, Screaming Lord Sutch always used to enter in a locked coffin. They'd stand the coffin on stage at the start of the show, the music would play, an explosion would happen in the coffin, the lid would come open, and there would appear Lord Sutch. But one night, they had a couple of new guys carrying the coffin in, and they put the coffin on the stage, but the lid was facing the back of the stage against the wall, and it was upside down. So the music's playing, the cue comes for the explosion for Sutch to break out the coffin. Of course, the lid's against the wall, and he's trying to bash his way out of the coffin and can't get out the coffin, the opening of his show.
What's it doing in there? I'm trying to get out! Yeah? Come on! Hang about, don't be aggressive. Get a bastard fish lost!
And that's where that story came from that appeared in Slade. So all those little things that happen like that came from stories we knew from other people. So in fact, everything in it basically was true.
What do you remember about your first day on set? Any memories that spring to mind?
Well, it was hard because we didn't really know whether we were any good. That was the difficulty. We'd learnt our lines as well as possible, but that's only a little snippet of acting. You've got to make it look natural. You've got to hit your marks. You've got to be in the right light at the right time and that. There's a dozen other things